Welcome to another episode of Strange Planet, and we are now nicely ensconced in the Christmas season. And I guess we go back to the Victorian era when telling ghost stories at Christmas really became a huge deal. Of course, we're all familiar with Charles Dickens' novella A Christmas Carol, published in 1843. But even before Ebenezer Scrooge and Charles Dickens, people would gather around the fire in the Victorian era and tell ghost stories. For one thing, there wasn't much else to do with no electricity once it got dark. The other great thing was you didn't have to be particularly literate to tell a ghost story about the local ghost. And of course, once the Industrial Revolution got going and the steam-powered printing press, then all of a sudden, ghost stories at Christmas just really took off. And we're going to continue with that tradition. Jim Harold, of course, among America's most popular paranormal podcast hosts. He's got the Paranormal Podcast and Jim Harold's Campfire and a number of others. He'll update us soon about that. He's developed a loyal following over the last, more than a dozen years that spans the globe. And always a pleasure to have Jim Harold back on the program. Jim, how are you?
I am doing well, Richard, and even better that I'm here with you in your audience. And let me wish you and your audience Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and just so happy to be here. A highlight of my holiday season.
Oh, God bless you. Well, Merry Christmas to you and yours as well. So, at your house growing up, did you tell ghost stories at Christmas?
Not at Christmas per se. We told some spooky stories from time to time, and I think I've detailed this on the shows with you before. A couple of those, I think, kind of indirectly led to my fascination, along with Leonard Nimoy's In Search of, in all of this. So I can't say that we did it in Christmas time specifically, but I think that part of that is, in a way, it's kind of a close cousin. Talking about family memories of the departed. And I don't know about you, Richard, but I think that this time of the year, our minds turn, particularly of those who have reached a certain age, as we have, of those loved ones who have passed. So maybe not ghost stories per se, but a lot of recollections of loved ones that passed and bittersweet Christmas memories. And it's a time of year that you feel, I think, closer to those on the other side and they're top of your thoughts.
I think you nailed it. I think while the origin of ghost storytelling at Christmas may have begun in the Victorian era, I think what you're saying now explains why we continue to tell ghost stories. Because Christmas is, it's one of maybe three times a year families that get, they're all off and madly off in different directions. They gather. We take family photos at Christmas, and so it becomes kind of a time marker. We mark the passing of years at Christmas gatherings, and then there's one less person sitting at the table one Christmas, and obviously we tend to think of our dearly departed at Christmas time, and so when you do a specific on Campfire, do you do a specific episode dedicated just to sort of Christmas stories, ghost stories and so forth?
We try to, and we're going to do that this year. And what we do is we work in stories from years past, plus a few, hopefully every year, a couple of new favorites. And so we do get Christmas stories on the Campfire, and it's always interesting. We get a wide range, and it's fascinating to hear the stories that people have to share at every time of year, but this time of year specifically.
You have a couple from Seattle. Sarah slept
Yes.
over at her aunt's at Christmas and had an interesting little adventure.
Yes. Well, the thing with Sarah was this: her aunt lived in a really old farmhouse in upstate New York. So every year the family would go and gather together and visit. And one night, and this is while she was pretty young, a young girl, she was tired, so she went off to bed a little early one night while everybody else continued with drinks and so forth. And then as she lay in bed facing away from the door and feeling uneasy without knowing why, she felt a breath next to her ear, and she heard someone say, "Hey, hey." So she pulled up the covers over her head and spent the rest of the night like that. But what happened next was quite the Christmas memory. Next morning, she mentioned her experience to her aunt, and her aunt replied with a knowing, "Oh, that's the little boy." And it turned out that the farmhouse was haunted by a little boy. And the aunt would see this little boy regularly when she was often cooking in the kitchen or see him playing about the house. Now, they didn't have the history of the house to know what caused that, but the aunt specifically said that it was this little boy. Now, it's not a particularly Christmassy story, but it happened at Christmas time. But I guess the point is, particularly in these older homes, and that's why places like England and so forth fascinate me so much, is that in these older homes, you have these spirits now, whether they be residual energies, or in this case, if it said hey to her, you would think that it was interacting with her, that perhaps it was more sentient, but we see those kind of things. And, it is part of the picture, whether it's Christmas time or any time at all.
There's something. I don't find ghost stories involving children like really, really scary. There's kind of a bittersweetness to it, obviously, because it's a child, and perhaps that they passed at a very young age.
Mm-hmm.
There's also, I don't know, there's something kind of endearing about. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's one of I have to admit, a lot of people get scared by the demon stories and all those things. And certainly I think we've had this discussion before, I think there are darker energies out there. Mm-hmm. However, to your point, I think the ones that, tug at my heartstrings a little more are of maybe people who, experts, and I'm certainly not expert, talk about people who get stuck. And that is all, and we've had this discussion. That has always disturbed me, the idea that people could get stuck, because like you, I believe there's, a couple different ways you can go. Mm-hmm. And I maintain that belief despite all the spookiness. And it's one thing to think that people come back and visit because maybe they liked a place, or maybe they want to say hi to their relatives. I'm cool with that. The thing that worries me is this idea that people somehow may be stuck in a place because they don't know they're dead, or because that they're surprised that they're dead because of a sudden death, or they're afraid to move on because of certain beliefs or whatever it might be. And those are things that have been presented to me over the years. I'm not saying those are the real or not, but that does, I have to say, on a sad note, on this holiday show, that's one thing that's always kind of bothered me about the discussion of the paranormal, the idea that people might be stuck.
Right. Yeah. Especially as a child. I mean, that would be so lonely, thinking, you're spending almost an eternity away from your loved ones that way. Yeah. Sticking with Seattle. Now, this one is really a Christmas theme, because Janet stayed awake listening for Santa.
Oh, yes. Janet from Texas. Yes. So, anyway, Janet, her and her sister shared a bedroom when they were 4 and 9 years old. And Janet was very excited on Christmas Eve to catch a sight of Santa. She heard her mom go outside where her dad was working on their Christmas gifts, and she heard a new sound in the house, a soft swish of a glass door followed by the soft jingle of a bell. She thought it might be Santa. She snuck out of the bed to peek into the living room. A man was on the couch reading one of her mother's magazines. He was bald and had fine wired glasses. She felt like she was seeing something she shouldn't and ran back to bed. Her mother came back in and she ran out to tell her what happened, only to get in trouble for being awake and messing with her mom's magazines. Her mom thinks it was a dream. Janet thinks maybe because this person was very small that it was an elf, but Janet swears she wasn't dreaming, which is amazing to me. And we've had a couple of stories like that where people have actually said that they've seen something that looks like Santa or along that line, and that they were fully awake. Now, maybe, Santa has a lot of helpers out there. I don't know, but I thought that I'm just picturing him. It's almost like Norman Rockwell with the glasses looking at the magazine, Saturday Evening Post. Probably not at this point in juncture, but you get the drift. So I do believe that Christmas has a certain magic about it. And who knows, maybe some things are possible at Christmas that we really, don't understand. And maybe it's, talk about the idea of tulpas and things like that, the thought forms. Maybe in addition to the real Santa, of course, we all know is out there. But maybe there could be thought forms sometimes, and maybe we can generate some Santa's helpers. It might be a kind of out there thought, but just as we do this grand thought experiment, maybe it's another thing worth considering.
Well, I tell you, after doing this show, and I'm sure you feel the same way, so many years, I don't discount anything anymore. I just had an amazing conversation with this gentleman, Mitch Horowitz, talking about...
Oh, yes.
Do you know Mitch?
Yeah, I've interviewed him. Yes, he's great. I'm trying to get in touch with him for this latest book he just came out. But yeah, he's fantastic. Very interesting.
Particles and how particles behave. Well, they behave a certain way when they're being observed and measured, and when they're not being observed and measured, then all of a sudden they turn into a wave, and there's a total non-locality. And I don't want to get too technical and scientific here, but it just leads into this whole idea of hyperdimensions and a multiverse, and so when you look at the reality, is nothing like we imagine, because we're made out of particles. And so do we have are we also non-local? And if so, then we can be everywhere at once, and that really opens up the whole ball of wax for just about anything, really.
Well, people report that at the time of passing, they have a loved one, and multiple people will report seeing that loved one at the time of death in multiple locations. And or you look at something like twins, where one is on the East Coast of America, one's on the West Coast. One, gets in a car accident and has an abdominal injury, and the one on the West Coast feels the pain.
Yes.
I mean, and this speaks to something, Richard, and we talked about this. I keep saying that, but we have talked about is I don't understand this stuff. But the one thing I think I do understand after not as long as you, but 17 years of doing this, is that reality is far stranger than we realize. And there's some other stuff going on that, that rational, quote, rational explanations do not cover. There's some X factor out there. There's a lot we don't understand, much to that discussion you had with Mitch.
Yeah. I mean, the world, we see everything. We're prisoners of five senses. We literally are prisoners of five senses, and they're pretty coarse. They're not fine measuring instruments, really, when you think about it. So, which leads me just to in summation of that story, who's to say that there's not elves, leprechauns, and someone named Santa Claus that's an interdimensional entity?
I had a gentleman, and this was very early on in the campfire, who said he believed he saw a leprechaun. And he kept it to himself for years. He was ashamed. This was when he was a kid, probably in the late 60s. And he was having dinner with his brother of a comparable age 20 years later. And he finally broke down and said, I got to tell you something. You're going to think I'm nuts. You're going to think this is crazy. But when I was a kid, I used to see a leprechaun dance around my bed at night. And it happened multiple times. And his brother said, oh, no, you saw him too. Now, again, was it a leprechaun? Maybe not, but maybe it was something he interpreted as a leprechaun, but no less real. That's a thought. We were talking about Santa Claus earlier, and I've got a great story about when Santa Claus came through. Would you like to hear a story about when Santa Claus? Okay, this is Courtney from Kansas. Now, when she and her twin sister were 5 years old, Courtney had this favorite stuffed toy. I think most of us had them. I had a Curious George. This was a soft, lovely bear named Brown Bear that had a little music box in his ear. And one year it broke. a few months before Christmas. And Courtney was upset. The music wouldn't play, and she decided that Santa could take Brown Bear to the North Pole and fix it. I mean, he had all these elves, right? Why couldn't he fix Brown Bear? Now, her parents said, maybe you should consider a new toy. Is there a new toy you would like instead of Brown Bear? And she said, no, I don't want anything else. And they said, well, Santa's too busy to fix Brown Bear. And I said, no, I just want Brown Bear fixed. So anyway, she left Brown Bear Christmas Eve near the hearth so Santa wouldn't miss it, and a note explaining the situation. Very prepared, very mature. She left Brown Bear there. She went straight to the bear Christmas morning. Her sister went right to the gifts, but she went to Brown Bear. Brown Bear had been moved over to the couch. And in a Christmas miracle, she presses Brown Bear's ear, and it works. Now, her parents looked astonished. In later years, she came to the idea that, well, maybe Santa had some help and they repaired it. Her mom was really good with sewing. Her dad was very handy with tools and things. And she asked him, hey, did you help out Santa today, or did you really fix Brown Bear? And they absolutely denied it. They said that they were as impressed with the Christmas miracle as she was. And a day or two, and this has been a couple of years ago, she told this story, but a day or two before she came on Campfire, she literally picked up the phone, called her dad, and said, Dad, level with me. Did you help Santa? Did you fix Brown Bear? He said, absolutely not. Santa delivered a healthy brown bear and a Christmas miracle.
Wow. Wonderful story. Wonderful story. Jim Harold is with us. Jim Harold's Campfire, available wherever fine podcasts are found. And volume 5 of Jim Harold's Campfire is, you got 5 volumes. I know I keep bugging you about this.
I am going to get 6 next year, I promise.
Okay.
Hold me to it.
All right. Let's take a time out. We'll come back and we'll talk about Jerry from Illinois and the Furry Angel. Back with more of Strange Planet. Stay with us.
Every new season, we find a reason to improve our lives and our health. And C60 Evo organic edible oils deliver noticeable benefits quickly. A spoonful in the morning delivers energy and endurance all day long. And I sleep deeper and wake up feeling refreshed because C60 ESS60 works. Carbon 60 received the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1996 when it was used for industrial applications. C60 Evo's ESS60 is a breakthrough technology, upgrading C60 to be safe for human and pet consumption. ESS60 has been called a miracle molecule because of the physical and mental benefits people are enjoying. Their lab has a proven track record of 31 years and thousands of happy customers across the world, just like me. So, treat yourself, your friends, and your family to C60 Evo and use my link, EVRS, to get 10% off your first order. Again, my link, EVRS, to get 10% off your first order.
Jim Harold, host of the Paranormal Podcast, Jim Harold's Campfire, executive producer, Unpleasant Dreams. Tell me about Unpleasant Dreams.
Well, Unpleasant Dreams is a little experiment we've been doing with my eldest daughter. She graduated from college last year. One of the things she had was a minor in drama, and I always loved to do drama. She was award-winning in the region when she was in high school, so a little bit of biased, proud papa here, but she's very good. And we did an experiment where we did, probably about 20, 22 episodes covering different paranormal topics. And we're going to do maybe something, you heard it here first, we're going to continue that show, but with a little bit of a twist next year that we'll release. But it's nice to actually kind of produce a show that you're not talent on. And I use the word talent in my case very loosely. But the point being that it's kind of neat and it's kind of fun to do that. And I like to see her kind of spread her wings and use her talent to bring something new to the spooky studio here.
Jim, you're always so self-deprecating. Let's keep in mind your programs have been downloaded over 60 million times. I mean, you're in pretty rarefied company with that. So we're talking about some wonderful, some not so wonderful, Christmas ghost stories and Christmas mysteries. Tell me about Jerry from Illinois and this furry angel.
Oh, I love this story. This is one of my favorites that I will tell tonight. Jerry was kind of like the female version of Ebenezer Scrooge. She was not a Christmas person. She said it was her least favorite holiday. And on one score, you couldn't blame her at all because she had had a very rough time this particular year. It was in the late 1990s. It was a couple of days before Christmas. And she was at odds for whatever reason with her family, not in touch with them. She had just had what sounded like a bad breakup in a relationship. So she was really, truly alone. She lived in kind of what she called a sketchy neighborhood in Chicago, in this walk up, and there were 9 units in her wooden structure. And she was all by herself, and it was kind of like bah humbug. And you really, sincerely, aside from stories, you have to feel for people who are alone at Christmas and the holidays. And it is one of the most joyous times of year for many of us. But for many of us, it's one of the most depressing. So Jerry was in a bad place. So this was a cold Chicago night. She was standing inside her kitchen thinking these thoughts of doom and gloom. And suddenly she heard a scratching at her back door. And she thought, ooh, this is a dicey neighborhood. What's going on here? She opened up the door, and there was a beautiful dog outside. I think it was something like a golden retriever. Absolutely beautiful, looking at her. She asked the dog out loud, "What are you doing here?" And then the dog nudged the screen door open with its nose of its own volition and walked in like it owned the place. She said it was an absolutely beautiful dog, perfectly manicured, perfectly groomed, no fleas, no ticks, no mange. And again, it didn't look like in any stretch of the imagination, a stray. It had a red collar and no tags. Now, the weird thing Jerry thought was, well, how in the world did this dog get up here? First of all, you have to walk up rickety wooden steps. And there were 9 units in the apartment, and there were 4 doors, each to a different unit. And she was the last one in the series. So the dog literally had to walk up to these rickety stairs, go past all these other units, and come to her. She said that even people looking for her couldn't find her, but yet this dog found her apartment. And she said it was like having Lassie in your house. It was just a great dog. And she said, well, I've got to let this dog stay here tonight. I don't know who it belongs to. We'll deal with it in the morning. And it made her really feel good. It made her feel like she had a friend that night and somebody with her. And she said, you know what? I'm going to take care of this dog until the morning, and we'll figure out what to do from there, find its owner. They got along so famously, the dog slept with her in her bed. She said it is exactly what she needed at the time and exactly what she would have asked for if someone had said, "What do you want for Christmas, Jerry?" And in the morning, she was going to take the dog to the Humane Society. That was the right thing to do. She thought, this dog belongs to somebody. It's too well groomed. I'm not going to be selfish. I'm going to do the right thing. But first, let the dog go out and go to the restroom and do its business. But she didn't have a leash. So she let the dog out, and the dog ran off. And she never saw the dog ever again in that neighborhood. Never, ever. Never saw it before, never saw it since. She thinks the dog was far more than a dog. She thinks that it very possibly may have been an angel in the form of a dog that was sent there to comfort her because that's what she needed. And it made it one of the merrier Christmases ever. And I heard that this is a new story. It's not even been on the show this year. We're going to put this on later this month. And I just got that, and it's just like, I'm a dog person. That's like a lump in the throat story.
It is. It is. We are dog people in this house, but we don't have a dog. I am so tempted to bring a dog home, but my mother-in-law would kill me. Plus, I don't think our pet rabbit would be too thrilled either. But, I could spend hours on Twitter watching all of these, dog, little dog reels. A puppy befriends a baby duck. All of these things, I could just watch those forever. We don't
Yeah.
deserve dogs. That's my conclusion. We don't deserve dogs.
That's true. The funniest story, we have our two main stories, and we have a nice little basement that we do some TV viewing and stuff down. And yesterday, I was talking with a friend on the phone, kind of late. It was bedtime, and my little dog comes down. My wife went to bed. My little dog comes down, and he stops by the couch, and he just stares at me like, "What are you doing? It's time to go to bed." And it was just the cutest thing. It was like, and I know you probably, being a dog person, have had this. When you have a dog and you're tuned in, you feel what they're saying to you. And I felt like he was just saying, "Okay, buddy, get off the phone and get to bed. It's time for bed." I thought that was so cute.
Adorable. Adorable. Another quick timeout. Jim Harold and Jim Harold's Campfire. More Christmas ghost stories after this.
November reminds us to be thankful and focused on boosting our radiant health before winter. And I use a potent remedy that's improved the quality of my life and deepened my sleep as well. I take C60 Evo olive oil every morning, and I have a lot more energy and mental focus all day long. My workouts are easier, and I have a lot more endurance. If you're into competitive sports, this is a game changer. Health is our greatest wealth, and Pura C60 ESS60 really works. ESS60 is a breakthrough technology delivering the carbon 60 miracle molecule for humans and pets. Check out the C60 Evo holiday gift collections for everyone on your list. They make amazing skin, lip, and hair repair serum that deliver noticeable results quickly. C60 Evo's lab has an impressive track record of 31 years and, of course, my personal recommendation. You deserve the best remedies on earth, and so do those you love. Buy direct from the lab and upgrade your life today. Use my code EVRS to save 10% off your first order. Again, my code EVRS and save 10% off your first order.
Well, we're telling some Christmas ghost stories here with Jim Harold, Jim Harold's Campfire and the Paranormal Podcast. And how do we subscribe, Jim?
Well, you just go to the podcast app of your choice and type in Jim Harold, Harold, Jim Harold, and also jimharold.com. They're always there, but pretty much it's so different, Richard. As you know, this has evolved so much over the years. You used to have to hook up all these cables and things, but obviously whoever's listening to us now is a podcast listener. Whatever app you're listening to this show in, just look for me. You should be able to find me, and I hope you enjoy the shows.
Adam from Connecticut, he travels to an old house in rural Vermont to spend Christmas with his scattered family. What happened?
Oh yeah, this is the show, the stories that we really love and kind of harken back to on a regular basis. I call them Campfire Classics. This one probably goes back all the way to 2010, very early in the show. So Adam called in, and he mentioned, as you said, his family was geographically scattered across the East Coast. And his family would regularly rent a big house in Vermont to bring everybody together and celebrate Christmas together over a few days. Sounds cool. Great idea. Now, they rented this house, and there was staff. There were people working there, to assist and so forth. And they had heard stories of it being haunted. So anyway, the way this was set up, it was a bunch of different families. So the folks with kids, like small kids, they got the bedrooms. So Adam and his brother were kind of, sleeping where they could find a spot, and they were sleeping on couches. And on Christmas Eve, they just decided to sleep like in the main area of the house. And so anyway, it's 2:30 a.m. on Christmas Eve, and he was sleeping in the main area of the house. And there's this grand staircase. And he woke up and he said he saw a tall figure at the top of the large staircase. And at first he thought it was one of the family members getting up to use the bathroom, or Santa Claus, of course. The figure was perfectly still, and he realized that it wasn't a person, it was just a silhouette. But by the look of it, he got the sense that it was wearing a tuxedo. And this thing walks slowly down the stairs. And this is something, Richard, I've heard other people report about seeing weird entities. He moved in kind of a herky-jerky manner, like a puppet on a string. Adam thought, surely I'm dreaming. He rubbed his eyes, shook his head, and realized he wasn't dreaming. And this figure goes down to the bottom of the stairs, and it kind of looks around like it's back home at last, and that it's great to be back. Kind of like, folks, if you don't see the video, you're kind of looking and you're kind of, when you get back home and you're like, it's good to be back home.
Soaking it all in.
Yeah, exactly. And this figure said in a weird, echoey voice to no one in particular, "Oh, my love, what a mirror image we are." Wow. Oh, my love, what a mirror image we are. Who knows what that means? And then it disappeared. Adam, couldn't figure out what in the world he just saw. So in the morning, they're all at breakfast and they're eating, and he asks, "Did anybody see anything last night?" And nobody had seen anything except for one uncle who said that a mysterious head poked into his room in the middle of the night. And that was the story of what a mirror image we are. And I don't know what that means. Now, I had put together the theory on the call. Well, maybe since this seemed to be kind of a grand house, maybe this was a wealthy person who once lived there and was at some kind of a Christmas party or some kind of holiday function, and it was kind of replaying. That was my working theory. I don't know, but I love that story. In fact, we do, Richard, something that I kind of copied from one of the radio stations I work from. We do a holiday ornament contest, right, where people send in ornaments based on themes of the shows. And somebody did a beautiful ornament on this particular story. But I love that story. That's one of my all-time favorite stories because it goes into that head scratcher category. What in the heck does that mean?
Yeah,
I don't know, but it's amazing.
And to me, the mysterious saying, it adds credibility to the story because it's not something obvious. It's a riddle. It's almost inscrutable, like what that meant. And so if someone was making a story like that up, they would be something more, they would say something, the ghost would, or the entity would say something more.
You would expect.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's good to be back, or,
exactly.
whatever. Yeah.
Get out of my house.
Why are you sleeping on my couch?
Kelly in Washington was spending the holiday. I remember being away in college or university and coming home at Christmas break and going back to my childhood bedroom and waking up there Christmas morning. It was always a great time. Mm-hmm. Kelly from Washington did the same thing at her parents' home.
Yeah. She comes from a small town in California. And as you said, she travels back every year. And her parents put up a small Christmas tree on her bedside table. And you had to push a button to turn it on. And one night she woke up a little bit chilly. So she readjusted her blanket and she just had this weird, sparkling, strange amount of static electricity. Now, being a campfire listener, she was thinking about whether static electricity could be triggered by ghosts. I wouldn't necessarily make that connection, but I understand. And there is some interesting stuff about people, and there's a name for it, and I know you know it. I can't remember where people walk by light poles, for example. And
sliders.
Yeah, they turn on. Yeah. So anyway, she was specifically thinking about, could this static electricity, and we know there's a scientific basis for static electricity, but could there also be some kind of paranormal link of some sorts? Just as she was thinking that, her Christmas tree lit up spontaneously untouched. And it kept her awake for a few minutes. Then she fell asleep. It was a pretty brief story, but it got me to thinking about another campfire story. And I mentioned this on the call from years back, a woman who worked in a funeral home. Mm-hmm. And they had this one lamp that had this habit of turning on by itself. There was just one thing. I mean, that's kind of weird. But what made it even a little bit stranger was the light was never plugged in.
Dun, 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 dun. Yeah. Those are great.
I am interested in this. It's electrical interference or something. Our friend Micah Hanks has written about it. I forget what it's called, ELI or something. Listen, there'll be a listener out there who knows what I'm talking about. But literally, some people can walk around electronics or electrical things and have an impact on them.
Right. Yeah. Now, this happened to me years and years ago. I used to work very late at a radio station, and I would walk home through this particular neighborhood, and to get to my side of the city, I had to cross over a pedestrian bridge, and it was lined by street lamps. And for about 3 weeks straight, every time I crossed over, this particular street lamp would flicker and go out until I finished crossing over the bridge, and then it would turn back on. Happened for about 3 weeks, and then never again after that while I lived there. But they're called sliders, street lamp interference.
Yeah, so street light interference. That's it. I said ELI, it's SLI. So.
Yeah, or sliders sometimes.
Yeah. And again, it seems plausible to me. Now, there's even been studies done, and I don't have them ready to pull up, that some people have a negative impact on technology. Mm-hmm. And I will tell you, I tend to be someone who actually, there are many things I have negative impacts on, but typically, and I'll say this and we'll lose our connection, but typically I have good luck with technology. My wife, on the other hand, almost any a piece of technology she interacts with, and she's a smart woman. She has a master's degree, blah, blah, blah. She learned computers back when there was DOS, me too. So, I mean, she's not technically illiterate. I don't want to put that down, but she does seem to have ridiculously bad luck with technology. And I can take the same piece of technology and do the same thing, and it will seem to work for me. It's just a weird thing.
Sometimes people that have been hit by lightning will have that effect. I'm guessing Mrs. Harold has not, I hope.
Not that I'm aware of, and I think I would be aware.
All right. Derek in Florida.
Yes.
What happened to Derek in Florida?
Well, some people, they might call this the nightmare before Christmas, with apologies to Tim Burton. When Derek and his sister were kids, Santa, of course, would bring presents, and they both had a kind of a bad habit, I guess. They both wake up really early and sneak out to see what Santa brought. Now, one year, Derek's sister did this by herself. And it was very, very dark, and she was about 6 years old this particular year. She was looking at the toys, amazed by the spectacle of what Santa had brought her. And she looked up, and suddenly she saw a solid black figure standing over her. And it had dimensions. It was not flat. A lot of times we hear about the shadow people, and they're like cut out of the universe, and they're flat. Mm-hmm. This had dimensions. She said she hadn't seen the figure when it entered the room, and it made no sound. She backed away, but then thought, oh, it's just Derek, my brother. But she looked into Derek's room and saw him sleeping and knew it wasn't him. She looked back, and the dark figure was still there watching her. Now, I said it reminded me of the Grinch. The Grinch came to steal Christmas. Now, Derek says his sister, to this very day, and she's an adult now, she said it absolutely, positively was not a dream. She said she was definitely awake, and the only other people in the house were her mom and dad, who were also both asleep. Now, this thing moved. It stayed there. And then finally she decided, I better get back to bed. And then they went on and had a normal Christmas and so forth. But they said that they had other paranormal experiences in that house, but nothing like that. That's the only time they saw something like that. So again, I think most adults would say, oh, she had a dream. But again, I have a hard time when somebody says, I really experienced this. I hate to say, oh, it was just a dream, because I don't know.
Yeah, it's for me, that's not easy to discount a story like that. Not easy at all. I can't just
Yeah.
brush it off because
Right.
as we hear things, we know things, we learn things doing these shows that just like I was talking about particles and waves and string theory, and it's not that easy just to dismiss these things out of hand.
I agree.
An open heart and an open mind. Julie from Texas spending a picturesque Christmas in a small German town.
Yes, yes. Well, this was kind of a fun story because it ties into a theme that's come up over and over and over again on Campfire over the last 2 or 3 years. This goes back to December 2018. Julie's husband was stationed, I believe, for the Air Force in Germany. So they spent around the holiday time going to these Christmas markets. She remarked how beautiful the German Christmas markets are. And they came across a little antique shop at one of these markets, and she decided to buy a cross pendant and a cute bracelet to give to her sisters, her 2 sisters, for Christmas. A few days later, she was packing up things to send to her sisters, and she found that both the bracelet and the pendant were gone. And she thought, oh my, I must have dropped them on the way to my car. She got them something else and moved on, kind of forgot about it. After the holiday, her husband later found both of them in his breast pocket. And they thought that was weird because they don't even remember him having them. But they said, okay, well, we've got them now. And she put them in a specific drawer so they wouldn't get lost to send the following year. And comes Christmas time 2019. She looks for them in that drawer and they weren't there. So she starts second guessing herself. And she's like, I know I put them here. I know I put them here. They're not here. Summer of 2020, they're moving from Germany back home to Texas, packing up. Their daughter helped them unpack when they arrive in Texas. They found the bracelet and the cross.
Of course.
She put them in a jewelry drawer very deliberately, not to lose them. She says, I have them and I'm going to have witnesses. She told her daughter and her husband. Christmas 2020. This time the bracelet is there, but the cross was gone. And this is where her mind switches to there's something else going on. Something is moving these things, and it's not me. She ended up sending the bracelets to her one sister and a different cross to the other sister. A month before she called me on Campfire, she was packing for a trip to Mexico. She packed very, very carefully. In Mexico, a vendor was selling beaded glass strings to hold up your glasses. Mm-hmm. She bought 2 of them, stuck them in a zipper pouch in her purse. Gets home, takes the glasses chains out, and tucked in the little ball of the 2 chains together was the original cross pendant. She said she put a chain on it, and now she wears it because it clearly was a gift that did not want to be given away, her husband says. So she wears it, and it's supposed to be with her. And it reminds me so much, and I think we've all had that experience where, you put something somewhere, you know where it is, and it just mysteriously moves. And there's something called Jot.
Yes.
And we've covered this on Campfire quite a few times. I'm a little bittersweet about it because the author, Mary Rose Barrington, who wrote the book, she was, I think she was quite on in age. She was, as I recall, from Britain, and she was in the Society of Psychical Research. I interviewed her maybe in 2019, 2018, and subsequently she passed, and then we started to get all these reports of Jots. And I mention her every time this comes up, and I wish she would have lived to see the influx of calls that we've gotten on this phenomena of things moving for apparently no reason. Now, again, that doesn't mean every time you lose your car keys that it's supernatural. I don't believe that. But in these extraordinary, weird cases, who's to say?
Jot, just one of those things.
Yeah.
Wow. Jim, thank you so much for spending some time during the Christmas season and sharing some wonderful stories from Campfire.
Well, it's always a pleasure, Richard. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and Happy New Year to you, your family, and all of your great listeners.
Merry Christmas to you and yours. God bless.
A new Richard Syrett's Strange Planet drops every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Subscribe at strangeplanetpodcast.com.